Come in, close the door. It's good to see you. Tech time and new cards to talk about. Let's talk about them. Make sure you sub. One thing that is for certain, guys, is there are a lot of decks that are right around the corner, Orcust being one of them. And because of Orcust, it helped us find a tech that kind of popped up a few years ago, but it definitely is coming back. And that card is Jinzo. Specifically, we're starting off with Jinzo and mentioning Jinzo, not only because of all the trap decks that are right around the corner, shout out to Eldritch, deck profile coming soon, but we also have to talk about the clear and obvious fact that a deck like Orcust can search it off of Crescendo, while also being able to deal with really powerful decks like Malice that lie heavily on traps to get the job done. Specifically in reviewing the card Orcust Crescendo, it says when a spell or trap or monster effect is activated for that matter while you control an Orcust Link monster, negate the activation, and if you do, banish that card. You can banish this card from your graveyard and add to your hand one of your Dark Machine monsters that is banished or in your deck. But it'll be too late to search Jinzo if I have to banish it after I've already activated the counter trap, or I could just dump it off of Foolish Goods. Go off, king or queen. So not only searchable inside of a deck that was formerly meta and is definitely returning back, especially with more Sky Striker stuff to support it as well, I'd be remiss in not mentioning that if you have a deck that doesn't need its normal summon, you also can use this card to take the game over. Exodia Millennium, for example. Now, a card like this would be directly tied to a card like Book of Eclipse, taking the game over, or being a bluff trap card, because it's not a trap card, but it is a trap card. Having this card as a possible tech inside of a wheelhouse, inside of a deck that is returning to meta, let's move on. Now, while we're on the topic of Jinzo, I felt like we'd be remiss in not also mentioning a card like Jinzo Layered. Jinzo's a very complex dude, trust us. Jinzo Layered, though, guys, definitely has a place inside of the meta, or at least a tech option inside of a deck like Apophis, because if you can place 2 level 6s on the board, interesting. You can overlay for this card, interesting, and then Change of Heart to your opponent. If you have a trap card that's still remaining on your side of the field, it's also spot removal. It's almost like Dark Armed Dragon of Annihilation, except it's for level 6s and decks that can make them. Just saying, guys, rank 6 definitely leaves a lot to be desired, but I feel like this is a pretty decent tech that I had to mention because, again, Jinzo's just that complex of a dude. It's almost like we have a Fab 5 of possible tech cards going into the next format, especially with new trap decks popping up. I felt like I'd be remiss in also not mentioning Pankratops. Pankratops actually got hit down to 1, then came back to 2, and then now it's back to 3, but I feel like people have forgotten about the card and its 1-for-1 capability, the True Light that may be hanging around on the board, the Solemns that they won't want to use on a card like Pankratops, and various other new additions like Exalted, for example. I feel like Pankratops is definitely only going to gain steam, and you might want to have yours on deck. It also can clearly beat over a problem card that your opponent may still be playing, like Fenrir. Just has a hard day if he sees Pankratops coming. Usually with the blue eye stuff, they'll have some protection, but just in case they don't, you definitely can do a whole lot of damage. Especially to this deck and a deck like Fire King and other similar decks where everybody dies if a card leaves the board. The theme of this video, in theory, guys, is to basically handle a lot of the Backrow decks that are coming. And because of that, I wanted to get out of here by mentioning 2 cards, and that's Dragon's Mind and Wandering Titan. Both cards which will help you fight against trap decks when you're going first, or fighting through your opponent's board when you're going second. With Dragon's Mind coming out in Alliance Insight, you have a card that specifically says when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated and you control a monster with 2500 attack or defense originally, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. And if this card is in your graveyard, pay 2500 life points and reset it, but banish it when it leaves the field. It's like a counter trap, and Lost Wind had a baby, and that's what this card is. It's very good. And there's a plethora of monsters with 2500 attack or defense. Enjoy.